Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Then Al-Hafiz said, Kitabul Ath'ima, the book of foods. This word comes from the root letters Ta'ima, which means to taste something, and Ta'am, which is the singular of Ath'ima, means food. But this also includes drink as well. So Ta'am is something that can be eaten and also something which can be drunk. We even have evidence from the Quran to prove this. Allah Jalla wa Ala in Surah Al-Baqarah saying, إِنَّ اللَّهَ مُبْتَلِيكُمْ بِالنَّهَرِ فَمَنْ شَرِبَ مِنْهُ فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي وَمَنْ لَمْ يَطْعَمْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي. Verily, Allah is going to test you with a river. So whoever drinks, which is shariba, drinks from it, then he is not from me. But whoever does not make ta'am of it, meaning he drinks it, then he is from me. So ta'am is something which can be eaten or drunk. So we can say that something like water or orange juice or tea or coffee is from ta'am. When it comes to the asl regarding the at'imah, then we say, like we say about all things of the worldly affairs, that it is halal unless otherwise stated, and we do not say it is haram unless otherwise stated. The other principle about food worth noting is that Allah Jalla wa Ala makes halal all that which is good, and makes haram all that which is either impure or harmful to the health. He says, وَيُحِلُّ لَهُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ. He, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, makes halal for you all that which is good, meaning pure and wholesome to your health, and he makes haram all that which is impure or unwholesome. Food is something which man needs, and in fact we would say that if he's not eating and drinking, that there is something wrong with him, because normally it is ill people who don't eat and drink because they've lost their appetite. So man is in need of food and drink, but this is the funny issue. The fact that he's in need of food and drink shows us that man is deficient, because without food and drink he will die. But on the other hand, the fact that he's not consuming food and drink would also suggest to us that he's deficient, because it indicates that there is something wrong with him. Maybe he's ill, which is of course a deficiency. So there's no getting away from it. Whether you eat or drink, or whether you don't eat or drink, it both indicates to the fact that man is deficient. Allah Jalla wa Ala, however, does not eat nor drinks. And Allah Azza wa Jalla informs us that Maryam and Isa alayhimus salam used to eat food. He says, كَانَ يَأْكُلَانِ الطَّعَامِ. They used to eat food. So he's using this idea that they used to eat food to prove that they are not divine, because this is the belief of some Christian factions anyway, that Jesus is divine and his mother is also divine. So the fact that somebody eats and drinks proves from the Quran that he or she is not divine. So we say food is halal for people, and it is a blessing for the believers. As for the disbelievers, they also eat and drink, of course, there's no doubt about that. However, they will be taken into account and punished for what they ate and drank, because they consumed this ni'mah of Allah Jalla wa Ala, and they never once thanked Him. In fact, when they eat and drink, it gives them more energy and power to continue on in their kufr. Whereas for the believer or the mu'min, it gives him the strength to continue on worshipping Allah Jalla wa Ala. And as the kafir increases in his kufr, aided by the strength from the food and drink, then this only increases Allah Jalla wa Ala in his anger and hatred for the kuffar. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, هُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَكُمْ خَلَائِفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. He is the one who has made you successive generations, one after the other. فَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَعَلَيْهِ كُفْرُهُ. So whoever makes kufr, then this is only against his own self. ولا يزيد الكافرين كفرهم عند ربهم إلا مقتا ولا يزيد الكافرين كفرهم إلا خسارا. And the kufr of the kafirin adds nothing but hatred of their Lord, and the kufr of the kafirin adds nothing but loss. So we say that the rule is, the person who says that any item of food and drink, or clothing for that matter, is haram, then the burden of proof is upon him, the burden of proof being from the Quran or the authentic Sunnah. And the one who says it is halal, then the burden of proof is not upon him, because everything is halal in its asl. Or we could argue that both sides have the burden of proof. So the one who says it's halal, he has the burden of proof, and the one who says it's haram, he has the burden of proof as well. Only when it comes to the person who says it's halal, then all he has to do is to quote the ayah, هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. He is the one who has created everything for you on earth. And so this includes all types of food, drink, clothing, and business transactions, and so on. So there you go, he's proved it. If he was, let's say, smoking, then this ayah proves smoking is halal, because it is general, and it includes everything in its generality. If somebody says smoking is haram, then he has to provide evidence, which takes smoking out of the generality of this ayah. So for example, he's going to have to show that smoking is from the khaba'ith, and all the khaba'ith are haram. So the types of food which are halal, we can put them in categories. So we can say things like, every food which is tahir, and it does not have a harm, then this is halal. So this would not include something like poison, because poison is tahir, but it does have a harm. And to prove that everything which is najis is haram to be consumed, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ فِي مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ مُحَرَّمًا عَلَى طَاعِمٍ يَطْعَمُهُ إِلَّا أَن يَكُونَ مَيْتَةً أَوْ دَمًا مَسْفُوحًا أَوْ لَحْمَ خِنْزِيرٍ فَإِنَّهُ رِجِسٌ. Say, I do not find anything in that which is revealed to me to be haram on the one who wants to consume it or eat it, except that it should be dead animals or dead meat or flowing blood or the meat of the swine, because they are all rijis, and that means najis or impure. So everything which is najis is haram to be consumed, but not everything which is haram to be consumed is najis. So if we go by the opinion that khamr is not najis, so here we have an example of something which is haram but not najis. This is a bit like saying that every muskir or intoxicant is haram, but not everything which is haram is an intoxicant. So pork is not an intoxicant, but it is haram. And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says that any food, whether it is haram or halal in and of itself, any food, if you fear that it will harm you, then it becomes haram for you to consume that, even if this food in its asl is halal. For example, a person has diabetes, so he needs to look at what level of sugar he's taking in. So if he was to eat something which is extremely sugary, then this in the Sharia becomes haram for him. So let's say some sort of sweet cake or some pastry or something which is very sweet, which is halal in and of itself, this becomes haram for a diabetic because it is harming yourself. So generally speaking, foods like grains and fruits are halal because they are pure and they don't have any harm. And the evidence for those things which are harmful being haram, وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. Do not throw your hands into destruction. And with hands here, he means your own selves. Likewise, him saying, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do not kill yourselves. And this does not have to mean kill yourselves, rather, it can mean do not harm yourselves. And this comes under the tafsir of this ayah, because Ammar ibn Yasir, when he was in a state of janaba, he rolled around in the dust, because the water was too cold, and the cold water would harm him. And he remembered the ayah, do not kill yourselves, verily Allah is merciful to you. The cold water will not kill you, but there's a very high chance that it will harm you, or it could possibly lead to your death. So poison is an example of something which is not najis but is haram. So generally we say that those items which are najis are haram to be consumed, and those items which are harmful are haram to be consumed, even if they may be halal in and of themselves. But if they lead to harming you in your particular circumstances, then it is haram for you to consume that. So for example, overeating, in many cases it could lead to medical conditions, so it would be haram for you to do this, if there is a real danger that it will lead to your harm. The animals of the sea are halal to be eaten, all of them, without any exception. When we say animals of the sea, we mean those animals which only live underwater. So we are not talking about amphibians. One might ask, does this include shark? The answer is yes, it includes shark. Sharks are permissible to eat, because they exclusively live underwater. Yes, they do have sharp teeth which they hunt with, but this forms an exception to the general rule with those animals who have these sharp teeth or fangs and they hunt with them these predatory animals. So this is how the ulama have said it, that shark meat is permissible. Okay, what about the animals of the land? And we'll include in this the amphibians. As for the land animals, then we say the same ruling applies, that it is all halal because it comes under the generality, but we have some serious exceptions to be made. We know, for example, that the donkey is haram to eat because of the narration in the Sahihain. On the day of Khaybar, Abu Talha came out and they were cooking donkey meat in the pots, and he said, Inna Allah wa rasulahu yanhayanikum an luhum al-humur al-ahliyya fa innaha rijis. Allah and the Messenger have made donkey meat haram because it is rijis, meaning najis. But as for the zebra, then this is halal to eat. It comes under the generality of the permission. Also on the day of Khaybar, it is reported that the Prophet made haram the donkey meat and made halal the meat of the horse. Also we say what is haram is the animal who has fangs and it uses the fangs to hunt with it. And the narration for this is coming up. One of the reasons behind this, and Allah knows best what the reasons are, but one of them which we can extract is that these are fierce animals with a violent nature, as of course they are predatory, and if you eat the meat of these types of animals, you may adopt that predatory nature. But here's the issue though, hyenas are allowed to be eaten, as we have a clear evidence for that. The statement of a Sahabi who says that the Prophet ﷺ allowed the meat of the hyena. Likewise, if a muhrim hunts a hyena, he has to give a ram as a fidya. Well, this proves that the hyena is a game animal of the land, because if it wasn't, then it would have no fidya in the state of ihram. For example, if you're in a state of ihram and you were to hunt, let's say, a lion and you were to kill it, there's no fidya upon you, because a lion is not a game animal in the first place. A game animal being an animal you can hunt for meat. So what about the hyena? He certainly has fangs. Well, we say that hyena eats on carcass. It is not primarily a predatory animal. True, it can hunt, but it would hunt in a case of dire necessity. Otherwise, these hyenas, they feed on carcass. So they're not exactly the same as the lion or the tiger or the cheetah. Likewise, Allah Jalla wa Ala saying, يا أيها الذين آمنوا أوفوا بالعقود أحلت لكم بهيمة الأنعام إلا ما يتلى عليكم غير محل الصيد وأنتم حرم. O you believe, fulfill your contracts. The beasts of the cattle have been made halal for you, except those which have been mentioned to you, and those whom you hunt whilst in a state of ihram. So it proves that in a state of ihram, the hyena is haram to hunt and hence to eat this meat. But outside the state of ihram, you're allowed to hunt it, and if you're allowed to hunt it, you're allowed to eat its meat. So with other animals like cats and dogs, lions, cheetahs, and so on, then these are haram to be eaten. The pig does not have fangs with which it hunts, despite having a wild nature, and it has been known to attack man. But a pig is haram simply because it is najis. And the evidence for the pig being haram is as we have quoted from the ayah in Surah Al-An'am, and Allah calls it rijis or najis. Likewise, with animals of predatory nature, monkeys have also a predatory nature, and they are not allowed to be eaten. Likewise, the bear. What about birds? Well, we say with regards to birds that all types of birds are halal to be eaten, except two types. The first one, which is the ones who have talons and they hunt with the talon. So this would be like eagles and owls. Chickens also have talons and they are birds, but they do not hunt with them. Therefore they are permissible to be eaten. The second type, the ulama say, are those birds which feed on carcass, like the vulture. In fact, any animal which feeds on carcass, then this is not permissible to be eaten. However, this is debatable. The evidence for this ruling that those animals which eat impure food, then they are not allowed to be eaten, is the riwayah, or the narration about the jallala. And this is the animal which feeds on feces, or anything which is impure. So basically a jallala is an animal whose most of its diet is from an-najasa. So on this topic then, there are two opinions of the scholars. One opinion is that these types of animals are not allowed to be eaten because they eat najasa, and this is going to have an effect on their meat, meaning the meat of the animal that you're eating, and so this will be impermissible because ultimately you're gaining your nutrition from a najasa when you eat this animal, because this animal itself was feeding on a najasa. The second opinion of the scholars on this issue is that the jallala is halal. Yes, it certainly feeds on a najasa, but this najasa will not remain when you come to eat it. So it will not hold true that you are eating a najasa even though the animal was eating a najasa. Because this najasa which the animal was eating has now changed in the animal's digestive system. It transforms and changes into the blood and the meat of the animal. So based upon this opinion then, any animal which feeds on carcass is halal. So upon this opinion, the vulture would be halal to eat. Because animals like the vulture or the hyena, they do not have this wild, savage type of attitude which other predatory animals have. And to show that this is halal, we can give an analogy. We can say that if you grow a tree to plant the seed in, and you use manure as your fertilizer, and this manure is najis, then the tree grows from this manure. It absorbs this manure as it grows, and then this tree produces fruits. So now the question for us is, are we allowed to eat these fruits because originally they came from the manure? Well, the answer to this is that most scholars say that yes, you can eat these fruits, because even though they did come from the manure from its origins, because that's where the tree came from, but you yourself are not consuming manure. You're consuming the fruit, which in and of itself is tahir. This is because the najasa changed into something which is tahir. And this is istihala, when it changes its hal, or its condition, or we could say its state. So we say the better opinion is that even those animals who eat najasa as their main diet, then their meat can be eaten because you yourself are not consuming the najasa. The ulama also say what is haram is that which is seen as impure or unwholesome, or something which is generally not beneficial to the health. And this is because Allah and the Messenger have made halal all the tayyibat, the good things, and made haram all the khaba'ith, all that which is impure or harmful to the health, or seen as disgusting. However, with the ayah, which says وَيُحِلُّ لَهُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ, then this khaba'ith is talking about the khaba'ith for which we have a text that this is khabith. Otherwise the asl is that everything is from the tayyibat. And it does not necessarily mean that whatever the people deem to be khabith is in fact khabith and therefore haram. And something could be khabith for one set of people in a particular culture, but that very same item could be tayyib for another set of people in another culture. For example, the Prophet and the companions, they ate locusts in some of their journeys, but many people would deem locusts to be horrid. And the same thing could be said about the sand lizard. The Prophet ﷺ did not eat it because he didn't like it, but he did not make it haram either. And some people in some cultures may eat the dung beetle. There's no doubt the dung beetle feeds on this najasa of the dung, but the dung beetle for those people in that culture is perfectly normal to be eaten. Also note this word khabith. Sometimes a food could be described as khabith, not because it is haram, but because it gives off an offensive smell. Just like the Prophet described the garlic and the onions as khabith, and the people thought it was haram, but he said no, it is not haram, but it gives off an offensive smell, so whoever eats from this khabith tree, meaning the garlic and onions, then he should not come to the masjid. But garlic and onions are definitely halal. So we say in conclusion that even those things which are deemed to be khabith by the people are not necessarily haram. Rather, what is haram is the things we have text for. So for example, let's take the hedgehog. Is a hedgehog allowed to be eaten? Many people would deem it to be khabith, or something which is repulsive and the soul feels averse to eating it. That may be the case for most people, but that still doesn't prove that it is haram. Because even though you may feel averse to it, some other people may love it. It may be their traditional cuisine. What about the mouse or the rat? Many people would feel averse to it, but like we said, that's not a valid basis for saying it is haram. As for the mouse or the rat, we can say it is haram, not because people may feel averse, but rather, the Prophet ﷺ himself called the mouse the fawaysiqa. Fasiq is someone or something which is outside the fold of obedience. So the fawaysiqa is the miniature version of fasiq, because this mouse causes a lot of disruption and annoyance to the people. Otherwise, we have other animals which are similar to the mouse, like the jerboa, but that is halal to be eaten. But the mouse in particular is particularly mischievous. It is a fawaysiqa and it does all sorts of mischief. What about the snake? The snake is haram to be eaten because the snake is something which can be killed even during your salah. The Prophet said you can kill the two black things even during your salah, referring to the rat and the snake. And the snake has a aggressive attitude, and the Sharia has ordered that the snake should be killed. And whatever the Sharia orders to be killed, then that is not allowed to be eaten. So this ruling goes then for the crow, for the scorpion, for the rat, for the biting dog, and for the kite, which is a type of predatory bird. Likewise with the wall gecko, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever kills the wall gecko with one strike, he will have a great reward. Whoever does it with 2 strikes, his reward is slightly less, and with 3 strikes, it is slightly less. Thus, if the Sharia orders this to be killed, then it follows that we're not allowed to eat it either. Because the Sharia has ordered this animal to be killed because it is khabith. Otherwise, it would not order it to be killed. Thus, if it is khabith, it is not allowed to be eaten. Likewise, we say the rule is whatever the Sharia forbids you from killing, then you're not allowed to eat it. Because to eat that animal, you have to sacrifice it first. You have to kill it first. But you're not allowed to kill it. Therefore, you're not allowed to eat it. For example, the hudhud, the ant, the bee, and the butcher bird. These are 4 types of animals the Prophet ﷺ forbade to be killed. And also, the Prophet ﷺ forbade a person from using a frog as medicine. So you're not allowed to kill the frog either. And in fact, for every croak of the frog, there is a tasbih. As for insects, then many people feel averse to eating insects. But again, that is not a valid ground for saying it is haram. At best, you can simply say, I don't like to eat insects because I feel averse to it, and leave it at that. But you can't go around saying that it is haram. Also from the things which are haram to be eaten, that which is born out of 2 animals, one halal, one haram. For example, the mule, it is born from a donkey, haram to eat, and a horse, halal to eat. So what is the ruling on a mule? We say we give precedence to the haram, therefore it is haram to eat this. And the same goes with any animal born from one halal and one haram parent. So when it comes to food which is haram, then these are the general guiding principles. And apart from that, everything else is halal. So we can give plenty of examples. For example, the sand lizard is halal to be eaten. We have evidence that this is halal, but also it comes under the generality that everything is halal. The deer and the zebra, all of these are halal. What about the ostrich? The ostrich is a bird, and hence it is halal to be eaten because it does not hunt using its talons. All of the sea creatures are halal, those who exclusively live underwater. What about certain amphibians like the crocodile? Certainly the crocodile has fangs and it hunts with it, and it is one of the most ferocious of animals. We give this animal the ruling of a land animal, and hence it would be haram to eat. And this we feel is a stronger opinion, although you could have scholars suggesting otherwise. They would say it is not from the siba', from the predatory animals, even though it does have fangs. Although, practically speaking, the crocodile will have more of a chance sacrificing you for its meal than you sacrificing it for your meal. Okay, what about those things which are haram? Can they ever be halal? Well, the simple answer is yes, they can be halal in a case of necessity. Plenty of evidences for this. Allah Jalla wa Ala saying, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ فِي مَخْمَصَةٍ غَيْرَ مُتَجَانِفٍ لِإِثْمٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. So whoever is forced out of hunger without an inclination or a liking for committing sin, then Allah is the forgiving, the merciful. Likewise, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. So whoever is forced without desiring it or without going overboard or overstepping the limit, then there is no sin upon him. Verily Allah is the forgiving, the merciful. However, the condition is that it must be a case of necessity, that you fear your life is at stake. So it mustn't be that you're just feeling peckish or simply feeling hungry. That's not good enough. Secondly, the vital condition is that you need to be sure that it will remove this necessity. So for example, if you are thirsty or hungry, then can you consume poison? Well, the answer is no, because this will not remove your necessity, it will make it worse. It will speed up your death. Or for example, alcohol. If you are thirsty, you're not allowed to drink alcohol because you're fearing you will die, because alcohol will dehydrate you and you will die even quicker. And the third condition is that you consume just enough to remove the necessity and you do not transgress the limit, like how Allah says, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ. Whoever is forced to without desiring it and without overstepping the limit. So if just a little morsel of, say, dead meat will keep you alive, then you just take that little amount. You don't consume any more. You would be allowed to consume alcohol if you had, let's say, a morsel of food stuck in your throat and you didn't find anything to wash it down except alcohol. Then in that case, yes, alcohol will remove your necessity. So notice the difference. Also, we need to mention that there must not be an alternative halal item which you can use. So this would be very much in the case of medicine. Anything which is haram cannot be used as a medicine because there is a halal alternative, and if that item could be used as a medicine, then Allah Jalla wa Ala would not have made it haram in the first place. So anything which is haram, you cannot use it as a medicine and use the grounds of necessity to justify it. What about if there are two people, one has some bread and the other one doesn't, and they are both going to die out of hunger? Is it allowed for the owner of the bread to give his bread to the other? The answer here is no, because it is wajib for the owner of the bread to eat this bread to keep himself alive. Therefore, in this case, he is not allowed to give it to the other person, because that would lead to his death. It's a different case if the owner of the bread is not going to die out of hunger, but the other person, his companion, is going to die out of hunger, and he does not have any bread. In a case like this, it is wajib for the owner of the bread to give this bread to the companion. If he does not, then is the companion allowed to take the bread by force? The answer here is yes, he is, even though the bread belongs to the owner, who is not parting with it. Because what is obligatory here is to give the bread to the person who is about to die out of hunger. Allah Jalla wa Ala censures those people who refuse to give these small items of help when He says, وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ, and they prevent small items of help. What about if it comes down to a fight? Well, if it comes down to a fight and the hungry person ends up killing the owner of the bread, then we say that the owner of the bread was the zalim, not the killer. If the hungry person dies out of this fight, then he is a shaheed, because he died unjustly. Okay, what happens if the owner of the bread does not give the bread and the hungry person dies as a result? We say the owner of the bread was the cause for this person's death and he owes the blood money. And some other scholars say that he does not stand as a guarantor, but the famous opinion from the madhab of Imam Ahmad is that he does stand as a guarantor and he has to pay the blood money of unintentional murder. What about if a person, let's say, is drowning in water and he calls out for your help, please save me, and you don't do anything to save him? Would you stand as a guarantor and you have to pay blood money for unintentional murder? This depends. If you know how to swim, then you do stand as a guarantor. If you don't know how to swim, then you don't stand as a guarantor, because if you then get into the water, then you could well have two people dying instead of just one. And here's another issue which we have spoken about before when we were speaking about cutting the hand of the thief. When a person passes by a fruit tree and it has some fruit on it, or the fruit have fallen down on the floor, and there is no particular wall guarding this garden, so it's out in the public, and he eats from this fruit, either on the tree or that which is fallen on the ground. We say this is not stealing and it is halal for him to eat it. So with this tree then, if it is in a garden which does not have a surrounding wall around it to indicate that this is private property, neither does it have a guard watching over it, because a guard again indicates that this is private property, you're not allowed to take from it. So if that's the case and this tree belongs to somebody, it's in the public, and you eat from it and you don't take any fruit away in your pocket, then this is permissible. And we know that if you need to do this, the hadith tells us that there is no punishment upon you, but the punishment is if you take it away, because the narration says that you have to pay back double, and you will have a punishment. And when we said a wall around this garden, we mean a wall which prevents you from entering it. We don't just mean a little wall which is like a meter or half a meter, which does not prevent people from entering it. We're talking about a wall which prevents people from entering it, because this gives off the clear message that you need to keep out, and that this is private property. And the reason why this is allowed to be eaten is because customarily the owner of the tree would not mind people eating from this tree. However, we also have a narration which gives us another condition. In a narration in the Sunan, the Prophet ﷺ said about this situation or this issue that if you're passing by the tree, you have to call out to the owner 3 times so that you grab the owner's attention and you can seek permission from the owner before eating. If you call out once, twice, and thrice and still he does not hear you, or he's not there perhaps, then you are allowed to eat. But first you must seek permission by at least calling out to the owner 3 times, so that you could seek his permission when he answers you. This is the madhab of Imam Ahmad. The majority of the scholars say that you're not allowed to eat from such a tree. And as for the clear narration which says you are allowed to eat it, then they interpret this narration to how it used to be at the beginning of Islam. And when the Muslims first made hijrah to Al-Madinah, they were poor and certainly needy of food. So this was there to facilitate eating the fruits for them. As for when people are not so needy, then they say that this scenario of eating from the fruit tree does not apply, because the circumstances of the people are now different. However, the narration is the narration, it is clear. It does not say that this is only for the muhajirin at the beginning of the hijrah because they were particularly needy. If the narration is or general, then we have to stick to the generality. So we have backing from the evidence, but we can also say we have backing from just sound reasoning that this is something in which people don't mind if they have their tree out in the public and somebody comes and eats from it. Because the tree is in the public, they normally would not mind such a practice. But of course, helping yourself and filling your pocket and taking the fruit away, then this is obviously taking liberties, which is why the Prophet ﷺ has stated the punishment. He said that he has to repay double, and he can also face a ta'zir punishment as well. But anyone who takes these fruits after they have been put into the jareen, as the narration speaks of, the jareen being the drying place of the fruits, and this is definitely a private place and it is guarded, then this would be the official stealing, which would incur the qata' or cutting the hand off. And it is wajib for any Muslim to accommodate the guest. If a guest comes in from outside the city or the town, it is an obligation that this guest be accommodated. And in Ibrahim alayhi salam we have a goodly example. هل أتاك حديث ضيف إبراهيم المكرمين? Has the news reached you about the honored guests of Ibrahim? So they were honored because Ibrahim alayhi salam honored them. And so whoever has true iman in Allah and the last day, he must honor his guest. And this is the person who comes in to town from the outside, so he does not have a place to stay. And what do we mean by honoring? Well, there is no precise definition, it's just whatever is considered as honoring, then this is honoring. And it is to be done in accordance with your means. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, لِيُنْفِقْ ذُو سَعَةٍ مِّن سَعَتِهِ وَمَنْ قُدِرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقُهُ فَلْيُنْفِقْ مِمَّا آتَاهُ اللَّهُ. Let the one with riches spend out of his riches, and whoever has less money, then let him spend out of whatever Allah has given him. Also, you would honor the guest in accordance with who the guest is, so in accordance with his status, because not everyone has the same standards of honoring. One guest may see a particular treatment as honor, and another guest may not see it as you honoring him. You should also not do anything to inconvenience or embarrass the guest. For example, if you serve him some good expensive meat, you would say to him, I bought this meat for such a high price, it really broke the bank, but for you no problem, please eat from it. Do not say words like these, because this will simply shatter the spirit of the guest, and it's also you indirectly telling him, oh look at the big favor I'm doing you. So it becomes a type of minnah when you remind somebody of the favor you've done to him, and you shove it in his face, so as to speak. You must never do that with any favor you give to anyone. Rather, when you do somebody a favor, you give them a gift, then be humble about it. What about a kafir guest? Do you have to give him accommodation as well? There is a difference of opinion, but the correct opinion is that if this kafir is a dhimmi or a musta'man or a mu'ahid, then yes, the hadith is general, you must give him the accommodation, because the hadith does not make a differentiation between a Muslim and a kafir guest. So the Sharia places great importance in accommodating the guest, and the guest is the one who is passing by your town or village. He's from outside and he comes in, he does not have a place to stay. And notice here that this includes the kafir guest, and we can contrast this with a man spending on his family. A man is not obligated to spend on, let's say, his kafir parents or brothers and sisters, because they are kuffar. And you spend on those people you will inherit from, and a Muslim does not inherit from a kafir, therefore he does not need to spend on his kafir family. But look how this guest is not even related to him, but he must spend on him by way of obligation. Yet in both scenarios we are dealing with kuffar. And the correct opinion also is that even if this is in a city you're living in and it has hotels and restaurants, and a guest descends to your place, then you are not allowed to tell him, no, but there are plenty of hotels and hostels and bed and breakfasts and these types of buildings, so you have to go there. No, the hadith is general. You have to accommodate him. Wujuban. And this could very well happen in real life. You could have a friend who comes from another city to your city, but he does not want to stay in a hotel, and he says, oh, I have a friend living in that town or city, I will go stay at his place. So if he comes to your place, then you must accommodate him. So the Prophet ﷺ used the word ikram, which means to honor, and this is honoring in terms of food, drink, and a place to sleep. Your guest must feel honored. This is the ultimate guiding principle. For one day it is wajib, and for 3 days it is sunnah. Then after that, the guest does not have a right to stay in your place, because then the guest would be the oppressor by putting his host in an awkward situation. However, if the host does not feel in an awkward situation and the host would rather want his guest to stay for longer, then there is no problem in the guest staying for a longer time period. Weeks and months are possible. What about if the host has a wife, let's say, and the guest is a male who has traveled from outside? Then should he take this guest in? The answer is yes, it is still wajib.
Because you can still have a guest without having free mixing. Okay, let's take some review questions. So question number 1. We know that those animals who hunt with their fangs are haram to be eaten. So how do we then explain the hyena being halal to be eaten? Give both the evidence and also the justification. Question number 2. What is the ruling on feeding a man about to die of hunger? And if you do not feed this man and he dies out of hunger, what rule results from that? Question number 3. If most people in a country are averse to eating beetle, does that make the beetle haram to be eaten? Explain your answer.